Welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with me, Christian Harris. Today's episode explores a fascinating question. What if many safety incidents aren't really safety problems at all, but thinking problems? My guest is Helen Taylor Brinson from Brainworks Hypnotherapy, and we dive into what actually happens in the brain when people are stressed, overwhelmed, distracted, or under pressure, and why that can completely change decision-making, behaviour, and risk perception. So we explore fight, flight, and freeze responses in the workplace, why presenteeism may be a bigger risk than absenteeism, how stress affects judgment and attention, the importance of psychological safety, curiosity, and recovery, and practical ways leaders can help people think more clearly under pressure. This is a really thought-provoking conversation, blending neuroscience, well-being, and of course, safety leadership. So let's get into it.
Welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with Christian Harris. We believe that proactive safety and risk management powers business performance. Each week we explore this theme, sharing guests, stories, insights, trends, hints and tips. You can find us on all the major podcasting platforms, and video versions are available on YouTube. But for now, let's join the conversation with Christian.
Let's get started then on today's Safety Roundtable. So thank you all for joining us live. And if you're joining us on the replay, whether it's on YouTube or on a podcast, welcome to you as well. If you've not been to a Safety Roundtable before, they happen every 2 weeks. They're very much interactive. Typically, I have a guest. Sometimes I run a session on my own. But we've got a great guest who I'll ask to introduce herself in a minute. And it is an opportunity for you to join in. So Helen and I will chat. But if you've got comments, questions, insights, experiences, challenges, anything you want to share, and you're in the room with us, go to reactions, raise your hand, and you can come and have a chat with Helen and I. And if you are joining us in the sort of replay version, feel free to post on LinkedIn or somewhere and with any questions, and I'm sure we can come back and help you as well. So without further ado, welcome, Helen. Maybe to start with, you could just give a quick intro to yourself.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks so much for joining me. I know I'm not Nick, so it's great that you came along as well. So my name's Helen. I'm a solution-focused hypnotherapist by trade, but I also work with businesses to understand mental health as well and understand kind of what's going on in our brain. So a lot of what I do in my therapy is about how the brain responds to stress, to anxiety, to depression, and how we can change those things. So a lot of it's backed by kind of really recent neuroscience research. So kind of a bit of a mission is to help people understand a bit more about what's going on and why we respond in the way that we do. So that's me.
Perfect, thank you, and thank you so much for joining. So, so Helen, when people hear mental health and safety, many still think of them as kind of separate conversations. Why do you think that is, and why might that be a mistake?
So we always seem to separate mental health with everything. I mean, when we talk about physical health and safety, yeah, people understand that. Yeah, we all need to wear the boots and and the right gear and stuff to keep us physically safe. But we don't tend to have that connection with mental health, and that's because for a long time we've not necessarily considered it to be part of cause and effect of things that are happening within the workplace. We tend to have procedures and all those kind of things, but we don't tend to think about our mental well-being. So I think that's why that's one of the reasons behind. And also, mental health has always been a bit of a taboo until recent times. We haven't really spoken about it, and we didn't know very much about it either. And so, it's actually, fundamental. There's, as we speak today, I'll kind of explain a bit more, but it's fundamental to actually the safety of your team, of other people, because if our mental health isn't great, then our decision making gets impaired by this.
Yeah, absolutely. So would you be an advocate for example, most people joining us are going to be kind of health and safety professionals or risk managers. Should that sort of fall under their remit, sort of, do you think, or is it, do we need to have somebody who's a bit more specialist, and how do we kind of square that circle?
Yeah, it's a really tricky one, isn't it? Because it kind of falls between the health and safety and probably like the HR and the kind of well-being. I know a lot of companies now have like well-being leads.
Yeah,
I think well-being, it's really difficult, isn't it? Because when we talk about well-being, it kind of sounds a little bit fluffy. But
it
actually
can.
yeah. And so people tend to kind of shy away from it. But actually, I think it does, it is really significant when we start to talk about health and safety. So it kind of sits in between the two. It needs to have a bit of both, I think, between that
Yeah,
kind of HR and the health and safety. But you should have policies within your health and safety policy for mental well-being and mental
yeah.
health.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, fingers crossed everyone does, but I'm sure if they don't, they'll get onto that as a result of today's conversation. And we've called this session "You don't have a safety problem, you have a thinking problem." So, what actually happens in the brain when people are stressed, overwhelmed, or under pressure? And when we know from a safety perspective that often, if you can trace back sort of root cause, those sorts of scenarios are what happens just before some kind of health and safety related incident.
So what happens when we start to become overwhelmed or we start to get stressed, we're overloaded, we tend to we trigger something in our brain called the amygdala. And our amygdala in the brain is our fight, flight, freeze response. Funnily enough, I kind of liken it to that health and safety officer that sort of always goes, "Oh no, you can't do that; it's too dangerous." But it lights up and it perceives everything as dangerous. What that does is it brings us into our emotional part of our brain. So it stops us from having that problem solving part. Now, our main cortex and the left prefrontal cortex of our brain is where we problem solve. That's our intellectual mind. We come up with answers based on proper assessments of situations. It's quite positive, and it can risk assess really well. But when we're in our amygdala takes control, and it has kind of opt-out clauses as such. So it will either do the fight, where it will want to fight everything, or it will run and it will hide from something, and or it will freeze and it will not be able to make a decision because there's too many. Let's just freeze. If we don't move, then maybe nobody sees us, sort of thing. These are really primitive responses, and they're necessary in the old world. If we go back to kind of like our ancestors, that was really important. But in this environment now, when it's actually quite a safe world, but it looks for more danger. So what that means is we start to think irrationally, and we see danger and we perceive danger in a different way. And we might make uncalculated decisions, which is therefore we can sometimes then get ourselves into a health and safety crisis or an accident
Yeah, yeah. I was smiling as you were talking about flight and freeze because I'm a flighty freezer, uh, in self-diagnosed,
yeah.
in sort of like conflict situations. I've sort of like removed myself, or sort of just like hope that it'll just go away kind of thing. I'm not the best in those situations. So yeah, that absolutely resonates with me. What, out of interest, which of those three is the most sort of prevalent?
There's not. I mean, it really depends on the situational thing. So some people get angry. So that's that kind of fight thing. We raise our kind of anger, then it's almost like it's that to ward off that kind of threat that we have. So some people might get really angry. Some people, might retreat, and some people might just freeze and just not. And it really depends on the person and also situational things. So
Yeah,
it could be depending on how much stress you've got and as to how you'll get and how much energy you have as well. So if you're really tired, it might be that actually your body says no, we just have to back off. Whereas sometimes you might go in, all guns blazing. So
mm,
yeah, it really can depend on those things. But people might notice in themselves and maybe in their colleagues as well, just how people might be reacting.
Yeah, so it's obviously, as you say, it's a individual situation and a situational situation. That's
Yes.
terrible English. But sort of the overarching point around physical health and safety and stuff is that obviously if you're in that position of you're not able to sort of think correctly, you're therefore not likely to act correctly for want of a better term, and therefore that's when bad things can sort of happen.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we start to lose that access to all that information. I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where you've had something, you know, really maybe bad news or something, and all you've heard is the bad news and you haven't heard anything else around it. Because sometimes when we feel really overwhelmed, our brain will start to shut things like our auditory system down. So if we are in that really heightened state, we might not be hearing things properly because we're hearing danger words and our brain's going off, going, oh my gosh, this is really dangerous, and then not listening to the rest of it. Whereas when we're feeling calmer, when we're in our kind of intellectual part of our brain sort of goes, okay, right, that's something to notice, but actually what else is there? What else?
Yeah.
So you can see that kind of how we can misunderstand and misinterpret things really easy when we're feeling really stressed or anxious or depressed.
Yeah, yeah. I've got a personal example of my brain sort of switching off totally, which was the reason I'm in safety is to cut a long story short, I was minding my business, walking down the pavement one day, and a car came around the corner too fast, lost control, sort of went from side to side, mounted the curb and ran me over. So that's kind of what got me passionate about safety. But interestingly, this was 14 years ago. I can remember more or less until about 3 or 4 minutes, or maybe a bit less before. And then I don't remember anything for a few hours after. So there's this whole like black spot in my brain where I guess the trauma of what happened and my brain's never sort of released that to me.
Yeah, and it's protecting you. You know, so these things. The other thing to remember is that our brain is trying to protect us as well. It's not working against us. You know, it's not something to be really cross about, but it is a warning sign that actually, you know, you need to be doing something about it if you're not hearing things properly. But so it will protect us in that way. So it will shut. That's why it shuts things down, because it just wants you to breathe, and it just wants the body to be. You know, at the end of the day, it needs your heart to beat so that you can get all the blood to your organs so that you can survive.
Yeah, makes good sense. So in safety, we think a lot and we focus a lot on procedures and systems and kind of, you know, how safe the environment is and so on and so forth. Um, how much does people's thinking and emotional state influence risk and decision making in reality? In other words, that human element over and above all of those things that I spoke about.
It can have quite a significant impact on that. If we're, you know, and I guess we go into this kind of, we talk about that absenteeism and presenteeism. I don't know if you know the difference. You probably do know the difference between the two. So absenteeism, people being off sick. Presenteeism is people coming in to work not well. If we're not actually thinking in that kind of in that the part of the brain that is problem solving properly, if we've got other things that are going on that are distracting us, then we're not going to come to the proper assessment. We're not going to make those right decisions. We might cut corners if our perception is that we haven't got enough time because we're really stressed. We might go, oh, I won't do that now. I'll just do it. It will be all right. It hasn't happened before. It will be fine. Don't worry about it. So we go in and we might start to make riskier decisions because we feel overwhelmed and under pressure. And that's why we can have all the policies and procedures. But if our workforce is feeling really stressed and isn't given the time and or doesn't have, you know, a nice amount of workload, a manageable amount of workload, things are going to start to fray. Not all the time, but things will fray. And there will be people that can manage stress in a really great way, but there'll be other people that can't. And so it's being really mindful of that as well, because everybody has nuances and everyone's slightly different, and assuming that everybody's going to think the same way as you is also a bit of a risk too, because it's about our perception in that moment.
Yeah, yeah, makes good sense. Yeah. I was chatting to somebody earlier today actually, and I think it was their own survey they'd done, like a workforce survey, but quite a few people and in multiple countries, and they found interestingly that it was in the UK where the highest proportion of the workforce were sort of reporting a high degree of stress.
Yeah, there was a study done by a chap in Germany, and unfortunately I'm really rubbish with names and I can't remember who it was, but he came to the conclusion that actually we should run our workforce at 80% all the time. That should be our kind of that kind of baseline, so that when we ask them, when we do have those busier times, they have 20% in the tank.
Yeah.
So that they can, in those moments where we need them to pull out all the stops out, they have that. But if we're going to run our workforce in 100% all the time, that's not sustainable for anyone. We're going to burn out, and you're going to start to see cracks eventually, because people cannot maintain, because they've got nowhere to go. They can only go down. Does that make sense?
I mean, that makes very good logical sense to me, certainly. And it's also good, sort of, like a lot of things in terms of health, safety, and well-being. It's just good business sense too, because if you think about sort of planning and forecasting your business's performance, you never forecast 100% capacity utilization for people. Certainly, you might do for machinery. So yeah, and that aligns well with kind of what you were saying there. So yeah, interesting that the study is pointing to that too. Just if anybody does have any questions for Helen, feel free to kind of ask. I've obviously got plenty lined up in the can, so we won't run out of questions. But if you did want to chat, if anything's resonating with you, if you want experiences or insights you want to share, then do feel free to come and have a chat with Helen and I as well. So I was actually going to ask you about absenteeism and presenteeism. Why would you say that presenteeism is sometimes the bigger of the two risks for organizations?
Because, well, it's that I've got some statistics out here from the employment law and settlement solicitors. They said that the cost of presenteeism in workplace in 2023 was 105 billion.
Wow.
And it is actually, the employees lose about 44 days of productive work, which is pretty significant, really. And it's 1.5 times the cost of absenteeism. And that is a lot of it is down to when we turn up for work and we're not on form, we're not going to, again, not being in that kind of, in the part of our brain where we're problem solving properly, we're not going to see the problems, or we're going to see problems everywhere. And then that makes it really difficult to fix things, because all we see is another problem and then another problem.
Yeah.
We have this part in our brain called the reticular activating system. And it basically, what it does is it actually, if we ask it to look for something, it will go and prove it. So if you were to say, a classic example, when you're on the motorway, years ago, you used to do that, yellow cars, right? Go and look for yellow cars. And all of a sudden, you hadn't seen a yellow car. And then all of a sudden, those yellow cars start coming up. That's because we've asked our reticular activating system to do that. But if we're asking it, if we're seeing problems and saying, well, that's a problem, then the brain is going to go, oh, and this is a problem too, and this is a problem. So it will start to look at the problems and not the solutions. So again, it's not being able to problem solve properly, taking risks because we want to get things done because we feel we're under pressure. So we're more prone to take a risk than we are not, but also not paying attention. If we're not feeling great, or in whatever guise that is, we won't be paying the attention that we might need to pay. Particularly if we're using machinery and things, that has a significant impact on it. So actually, presenteeism is probably, well, statistics show, that it is much more of a problem than absenteeism.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm sure everyone can empathize with that. I mean, if I sort of am self-reflective and think about, my ability to show up and be productive day in, day out, I'd be lying if I said I was just as productive every single day as I am on other days. Some days I sort of turn up and it's like everything's flowing easily and you're in that kind of,
In the
that right
zone.
part of the brain and
Yeah.
you make big decisions and you build momentum and other days it's a difficult thing and you sort of
Yeah.
feel you don't really want to you'd rather be doing something else and that so and I've got my own business, right? So if I'm if I can see that in myself, then it must be happening to others as well.
Yeah, and also conflicts rise. The more that we're feeling, like I said, people might be more aggressive in the fact that they might feel more angry, or their tempers are shorter. So actually the kind of the interactions with the teams and can get a little bit more feisty. So you can find that you have a more conflict within your team, and again, which then kind of leads to that less people are paying attention, because they're paying more attention to the argument than they are to actually what you're meant to be doing. And other people get frustrated because somebody's not working in a way that they probably usually do.
Mm.
And so that breeds that contempt as well. So you can see how it all kind of can turn into this big melting pot of potential risks.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's a good question here in the chat from Edmund, which is how do we influence the reticular activating system to play a part in habit formation process?
So we need to ask it to look for what we actually want. So we're actually, so it's that. So one of the things that I do in therapy is asking people to think of 3 good things that have happened. Reflect each evening, 3 good things that have happened that day. It seems really basic, but actually, again, research has shown that just by doing that increases your mental well-being by about 40%, just by doing
Wow.
that for a sustained period of time, sort of 3 to 6 months. So by doing that, what you're doing is you're actually changing the perception within the brain. So if you are starting to look for opportunities and possibilities, so, oh, that was really good, that means I can do something more. So you're already changing that intention. That's what people mean by intent. It's like if we intentionally change the way that we're using that thought process, then the brain will then go and try and prove us right. So if we reflect daily on what's been really good, great thing for the team. Okay, what's gone well? You know what hasn't gone well because they would have told you, but nobody ever tells you what's gone well. So actually by asking that helps people go back up into the kind of main cortex, and then triggers that reticular activating system that goes, oh, that was really good. Oh, that was good too. And that was good. It really helps that perception. So it's changing. Sometimes it has to be a conscious thing that we have to do in order to change it, because we're wired to the negative. We're slightly biased to the negative. We have to, because we do have to keep ourselves safe. But by consciously starting to do that, it helps our brain open up that perception. The more stressed we are, the more tunnel vision we become. So it actually opens that peripheral so that we can start to see those opportunities.
Yeah. So it's almost like it's kind of one of those perpetual motion things, where if you're more stressed, you think more negatively, and then you get more stressed, and and you can't. It's tough to break that cycle.
It absolutely is. I mean, that's why therapy's here, right? Because we do get caught in those, and there will be people that get caught in that cycle, and it's difficult to come out. We can know all the ways of doing it, but sometimes we get so stuck that sometimes we can't find our way out. But by being aware of it, it helps you to recognize.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, makes sense. In safety, when we think about, something's gone wrong, we need to do kind of an investigation. Obviously, that's we need to do that, right? We've got to focus on understanding why something's gone wrong. But it's obviously very hindsight, backward looking. Whereas what a lot of what you do and what we've been talking about today is more kind of solutions focused, more positive, and more forward looking. Why is that important? You've kind of touched on that a bit, but maybe build on that in the context of, you know, what I've just asked.
So we can't change what's happened in the past. I think is the fundamentals of it. But what we can do is we can learn from it. So a lot of what we do is by looking forward and looking at things that we can do rather than all the things that we haven't done. What that does is it breeds motivation, and our brain needs that motivation. So it needs to evolve. It's ever learning. So our brain has plasticity. We're constantly learning, even into our 70s. Our brain still has plasticity. It doesn't hardwire.
Mhm.
Okay. So actually by looking for a more kind of positive way forward, or looking at it not in a toxic positivity way, we're talking about, okay, what's the best outcomes in these solutions? It helps us to keep our peripheral open. So we see opportunities, which is why when we reflect on things that may have gone wrong, reflecting on it as what are our learnings and the outcomes from this, what do we do differently? That helps us to then not feel like we're under threat. If we think that we've done something wrong, or if we think something's really awful, we're going to retreat. But actually, we need to keep that kind of that solution focused approach, because we know that we grow and we learn in a much more productive way. We don't learn from a fear state. We learn from a curiosity. The
Yeah.
curiosity is key to everything. Being curious about things is really good for our mental health.
Yeah.
From childhood through to adulthood. So that's why it makes a significant difference.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. So curiosity didn't kill the cat after all, but
No, not at all. And actually, there's nothing. It's not about being problem phobic. It's not about ignoring the problem. It's about recognizing there was a problem, going, okay, this isn't great, but actually, what we're going to do about it? How are we going to
yeah.
move forward with it?
Yeah.
It opens up so much more opportunity and curiosity to find better outcomes.
Yeah. That makes good sense. So if we continue that path around sort of solutions then, or things that we can do to kind of get better in this space. You've talked, I know, about sort of breaking things down into sort of smaller steps. So if having a problem, break it down into smaller steps.
Mhm.
Why is that such a powerful technique when people might feel overwhelmed?
Because if any goal, I mean, it's like saying to you, right, Christian, do you want to go and run a marathon?
Not
Off you
really.
go. Yeah. The thought of doing that is like, what? That's too much. You're not going to do it tomorrow. But with small increments, you're going to get there. It's those kind of marginal gains. You use it a
Yeah.
lot in sport, and it's really useful, because when we start to we love to create those big goals. And those goals are amazing, but we have this awful thing where we need to get there straight away. And actually, when we start to slow that down, do step by step, it makes it easier. I always use the analogy of, when you go up the stairs, the goal is the top of the stairs. Now, I'm 5'3" at a push. So my legs are not going to take one step to get up there. I'm going to need to use every step in order to get up there. But if we concentrate on one step at a time, it doesn't feel unsurmountable. It doesn't feel like a really huge staircase. It just feels like the next step. And
Yeah.
that's really helpful for our brains, so it doesn't become overwhelmed. We just take it in step by step. And then we actually move a lot quicker by doing that than concentrating always on the goal. Oh, we've got to get there, we've got to get there, we've got to get there, because we're producing overwhelm, which makes us fall back into our bad habits and retreat. So yeah.
There's a question in the chat here from Stephen, following on from the reticular activating system element. I think sometimes it doesn't help when there's vagueness or ambiguity or unclear objectives. Humans like specifics and the whys. So he mentioned Simon Sinek's book, Start with Why. If we understand, we buy in, then often the solution finds themselves. the solutions find themselves, sorry, as in we find a way to make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't. So again, there's a lot of us that don't look well. We don't like ambiguity. Some people thrive in that space. Some people like that kind of have that curiosity. But yeah, we don't like it. We do need procedures, and we need to know what's going on, and having more of an understanding. But it's our approach to that that's really important. It's that it's being curious rather than being fearful of it. So it's like, I don't understand this. Okay, what, I wonder why. Is a different thing to, I don't understand this. This feels too much, why are they doing this? Why are they, it's actually asking better questions to yourself. Is probably what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah.
Is that, is actually being curious about it. Again, it comes to that curiosity. Okay, this has happened. Why am I not understanding it? What needs to change? That has a different impact to that. I don't understand it. Somebody hasn't done something properly. It's like, okay, why am I not understanding it? How do we understand that? What needs to change in order for it to be more obvious or less ambiguous? So it's solution finding rather than problem finding. It's another analogy. So I love my analogies. It's like, we could end up in a hole, and we could sit in the hole and go, look at this hole. It's a really awful hole. It's really deep. Oh yeah, God, it's going to be really difficult to get out. I wonder what that bit of the hole means. Or we can go, oh, blimey, we're in this hole. It's not great. How do we get out? Where's the ladder? Do we need a ladder? How can we get a ladder? Do you see what I mean? So it's that kind of like, actually, that's the problem. That's the solution part of a problem.
Yeah. I guess that's also where the importance of psychological safety kind of comes in, doesn't it? If we're creating organizations where there is a greater degree of psychological safety, then you'd think that people would have the space to be more curious and the ability to problem solve a bit more, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, exactly. And this is what, this kind of full circle background to why mental health is important, making sure, we will make really great decisions and we will be able to problem solve really well if we're in the main cortex of our brain. But if we are feeling stressed and overwhelmed, that gets more and more hampered and difficult the more stress we feel. And then that's self-perpetuating as well. So actually, we need these spaces to be safe psychologically. There's lots of things that we can do, but we need these spaces to be able to give us that time to recognize when we're not feeling great and be okay with that, and work to find the solution to help help us feel better than hiding and feeling unsafe because maybe you're not feeling, life's happening at you and you don't have that safe, confident space where you can go and just offload.
So we've spoken about psychological safety just then. We spoke about kind of sort of, I guess, realistic expectations might be a way of talking about that sort of 80% concept that we spoke about earlier. What will be some of the other things that people could take away in terms of, leading an organization or overseeing health safety in an organization and trying to help people think more clearly and make better decisions under pressure?
I think one of the things that we have lost, and I think is a real health and safety issue, is the lack of breaks.
Right.
So the lack of lunch breaks where people sit at their desk and eat now. They don't go out. I mean, people, although not that I would ever recommend anyone smoking, but people don't have the cigarette breaks that they used to have, so they wouldn't go out and walk away.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that we overlook again with mental health and with our brain is that actually when we're not concentrating on a task, our brain in the background, the subconscious, is problem solving. So I don't know if you've ever been sort of out on a problem in work thinking, oh, I cannot get around this. you might have walked away, or you've had to go and do something else, and then all of a sudden you go, oh, it's this.
Yeah.
That's because your brain's still working on it. Just because you're having a break doesn't mean to say your brain is breaking. Your brain is actually probably working harder. So actually having those spaces and those times where people can actually have a proper break really helps with the problem solving, really helps with regulation, all those, making sure we're mentally regulated, all those things. Because in this post-COVID time, we're back-to-back meetings. We don't give ourselves breaks anymore. That drive when you used to, for the older lot of us, the drive to to go and see other companies or other people, that drive time actually was your brain processing. You were giving yourself a break. You were allowing your brain to process, finish that meeting, and then it's ready for the next meeting. But when we're back to back with our meetings, we're not allowing our brain to rest. And that's when what we actually need. So for me, that's like a fundamental to our work day. And the other one is making sure sleep is part of our working day, and people understanding and having a healthier approach to our sleep, because sleep is key to a lot of how we will feel and start the day in the morning.
Yeah. Somebody I spoke to once talked about having a stress bucket which fills up throughout the day. And then if you have your sort of good quality sleep, you can kind of get that bucket down to a very low level again. Whereas if your sleep's not very good, then the bucket never quite empties out overnight, and therefore it will start overflowing the following day. There's an analogy for you.
Yeah, that's an analogy I use in the in therapy as well, because if it's overflowing, one of the things is REM sleep, which is part of our sleep pattern, which reruns the events of the day and turns it from a kind of emotional thing to a narrative. There's something we have a bit more control over. So it processes all the stuff from the day, but it's only a 20% of our sleep pattern. So if we've got a lot in our bucket, it can wake us up. So there's lots of people that will wake up in the middle of the night, and then try and go back to sleep, wake up again, and then by the time they get up in the morning, they're really tired and they feel really negative, and so we feel really anxious, and we go on that cycle again. We haven't emptied the stress bucket. Again, if also when we're in REM, it's the time that our brain works the hardest. More than anything else you're going to do, that's when the brain works the hardest. And so sometimes we can wake up and we feel really sluggish in the morning, and we feel really tired, and we want to go back to sleep because we haven't processed that stuff. So it is really key to kind of emptying that stress bucket.
Okay. So if we turn that from a sort of, this is what we could do to encourage people in our organizations into what should we be doing to look after ourselves and our own kind of well-being, I'm guessing you're going to say obviously sleep, taking breaks, and that definitely resonates with me. I love to just go for a walk and get a bit of fresh air, and I do find that when not thinking about work, but just something will come, or a problem will be solved. So definitely keen on that. Any other sort of personal tips that you could give people?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say actually, going out in nature, so getting outside, making sure we've got, the daylight and hopefully the sun on our face, not for long. It doesn't have to be. We don't have to do this for hours on end. It's just allowing ourselves, allowing our brain to naturally do things. We live in an unnatural world from what our brain's used to. So, like, one of the best things in the morning, get up, go outside and just spend a couple of minutes outside as the sun's rising or the day's breaking. It's brilliant for our brain because it recognizes that we're in the day. But yeah, making sure that we are managing our phones. So when we do go out for a break, we don't necessarily just sit on our phone, because our phone can also be a product of fear, if the notification goes off or whatever, but actually disconnecting from that, making sure that we're having really good interaction with us, with the people around us, have those conversations, have a belly laugh, tell some jokes, but or not. It depends what your jokes are like. But but actually having good conversations with people, feeling connected is really important and fundamental to our well-being as well. We're tribal people. We like to feel that we're part of something, and making sure that we're hydrating and eating well. I know they're really basic things, but again, we eat on the run. We forget to drink. We forget to, we drink, really caffeinated or even sort of false sugars, all those kind of things. They're not great for our body. Actually, just making sure that we at least have a pint of water. Because
I've been sipping on a hot water as we've been talking.
Yeah, I mean, it's all those, they always sound like the fun police, but all those little things just do make a difference. It doesn't have to be all the time. It just has to be part of the process, because those little tweaks and those little changes make a difference. But reflecting yourself even each evening on what's been good, and that might just be from, that bird song that you heard, or the traffic lights were green all the way home, which was incredible. All those kind of those things, reflecting on that is really useful in order for us to keep our mental health as well as it can be. Life is going to happen, and it will happen, but it's having that resilience for it.
Yeah. I'm going to give that a go and do that sort of 3 things before bed reflection. I think that's, a good positive thing to try out. So I'll report back to you and to everyone else in terms of how I get on with that after a few months. But I'll commit to doing that now, so you can keep me accountable.
Yes, no, that's right.
Jordan here said in the chat, I try to change how I book meetings and aim to give my invitees and myself 10 to 5 minute back, for example, booking 25 minutes or 55 minutes. Yeah, I like doing that as well, booking in a meeting or I'll book it in for an hour, but I'll say to someone when I start, right, my aim is that we get out of here at 52 past, worst case scenario, whatever it is, and then have a bit of time back and stuff. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, it's a really healthy habit, isn't it? Again, it's just being really mindful, putting that to the front of your mind. Okay, what's going to be more useful for you? How are you going to build in those little rest breaks? How are you going to build in that little walk or something? Because again, we know movement really helps us. So it doesn't have to be going to the gym or anything like that, or anything excessive, but just, our bodies are designed to move. So making sure that we're moving after our kind of Zoom calls and things, putting those breaks in as well are really useful, and make a difference. It's only small things. They don't have to be massive.
Yeah. Another good thing I found with meetings is don't start them at 1/2 or on the hour. Start them at like 33 past or 37 past or something like that. And what you find with that, in my experience anyway, is if it says 33 past, people will actually show up at 33 past. Whereas, sometimes we're starting at 9, but 9 to some people means 5 to 9, and to other people it means 5 past 9. And so having that sort of slightly more specific start time seems to work. Yeah. I'm not sure if that's particularly good for anyone's well-being, but just came to me as we were
it does bring in focus. It will focus somebody because it's the unusual, isn't it? So somebody's like, oh, that's a really unusual time.
Yeah,
so it keeps it front of mind a bit more.
Yeah. Right, last couple of bits from me, Helen. If there's one thing to sort of distill this down that you'd love for safety business leaders to understand about human behaviour under pressure, what would it be?
It would be that people are going to behave out of character. If somebody is behaving out of character, then they're going to be a risk. But it's okay. It's about managing, recognizing that people's behavior aren't because they're bad, it's because something's going on or there's too much of something. So rather than saying I've always said, I worked for years as well in a school for challenging behaviors, and every behavior was a communication. So when we look at behaviors as communications, it changes our perception on what somebody's doing. It may be if they're acting up or if they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, what is going on for them? They're in their amygdala. They're in their kind of primitive part of the brain. Something isn't right. And so rather than going from a kind of aggressive, but kind of a more bolshy kind of way towards it, it's like, again, that curiosity, isn't it? Like, okay, they're not behaving quite well. What's going on for them? That changes the dialogue, and also it changes the way that you can't change people's behaviors, but you can change the way that you approach them. So if you approach them in a different way, their behaviors should just tweak or change slightly. So if we're going in, in a kind of a real, like, what's going on, that's going to trigger lots of amygdala action and responses. Whereas if we go, look, this hasn't been going right, is anything going on? How are you doing? What's, anything that you need help with? What's different? Being curious.
Yeah. I think that's great advice, because, that's something that's, again, it feels like a manageable thing that we can do as well, on our own, which is, adjust. We can't control other people. We can only control ourselves. If we can adjust the way that we approach different situations, then, because it's every action has a equal and opposite reaction, or something like that, isn't it? Is a phrase. I butchered that a bit, but you know what I mean. So yeah, I think that's really, really good, really good advice. Great. Well, look, thank you so much for joining. Where can people connect with you? Where can people learn more? And is there anything you would sort of recommend people do, whether it's, follow you, or whether it's check out this book that someone else has written or you've written, or the floor is yours, basically.
Yeah, for books, I mean, there's a great book called The Brain at Rest. So understanding why rest is important. That's a great one, and I can't remember the name of the author because, but I'll send you the details.
Yeah, you're not
probably the
names.
best
That's
thing.
right. Yeah.
You can always find me. My company is called Brainworks Hypnotherapy. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. I don't do a lot of social media stuff, but I'm always around. I hang out with Nick Elston quite a lot, so you'll probably see me around there as well. But if you have any questions, or if you want a conversation about things, please get in touch with me. My email is helen@brainworkshypnotherapy.co.uk. I can put that in the chat, and we can. Yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions. But be curious. It's like, actually, that's if nothing else, just
take that away.
Yeah, take that away.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Helen. Yeah,
You're
really
welcome.
enjoyed it. And thanks for everyone else joining Helen and I today as well. And we will see you again on the next one. Cheers.
Thanks for joining us on the Safety and Risk Success podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit follow and do share on social media. Does anyone you know spring to mind as a great guest, even yourself? If so, please contact us on podcast@slipsafety.co.uk. See you next week for another episode.